Today we're going to be comparing stories from Interpreter of Maldives based in South Asia and African short stories based in Africa. The first story we're going to be looking at is called Real Durran. It's a story of a 64-year-old woman, Burima, who is sweeping the stairs of an apartment building. She tells stories of a luxurious past life that no one really believes, and always ends the phrases with "believe me, don't believe me." She sleeps on dirty bedding on the roof and is promised new ones by a tenant called Mrs. Dalal. One day, Mr. Dalal buys two sinks, one for his apartment and one for common use. The tenants get jealous and start renovating the apartment themselves. Burima thinks it's too much to look after all the workers and sets off to the market, where her skeleton keys that open the box of her life savings are stolen. When she returns, she finds out the sink was stolen, and the tenants blame her for it. She's thrown out to the street while saying, "Believe me, believe me." Now, the structure of this book is opening incident, turning point, transitions, and conclusion. The incident being the bed sheets getting ruined and the promise Mrs. Dalal gives her to give her new bed sheets. The turning point is when Mr. Dalal brings in the new sink. The transition goes from Burima's phrase, "believe me, don't believe me," to "believe me, believe me." And the conclusion is her being set off into the street. The style of this story is third person. It helps the reader take the perspectives of everyone in the book with an unbiased point of view. It also makes the reader side with Burima at the end of the story. If it was in first person, we might not have believed her because she might have just simply lied. The lenses that can be applied are social power, political, feminist, and post-colonial lens. Now, the status quo at that time was that India and Pakistan had recently had their partition, and we know that Burima is a refugee because of that. The caste system, we can see over here somewhere, is still affected the community. Now, Burima was at the bottom because she was a street sweeper and she was paid with food and shelter. She's also a woman, which forces the reader to use the gender lens to analyze her position in the story. She might not have been considered a real Derwin because she's not a man. Now, the post-colonial lens can also apply to this story. The colonizers, England, are the ones responsible for the partition and forcing Burima out of her home and going into somewhere else, and seemingly out of her lavish lifestyle that some choose to believe, some choose not to believe that she lived. The Treatment of Bibi Haldar is a story about a 20-year-old Indian woman who has a disease that can only be cured by getting married and having intercourse with a man. Bibi lives with her cousin Haldar, who runs a shop in the village, and his pregnant wife who, when she gives birth, blames Bibi for the sickness of her child. They kick Bibi out of the house, and the community is outraged because of this. They run Haldar out of business by not buying anything from him, and this forces him to move out. After some time passes, Bibi is living in the storage room and is now mysteriously 4 months pregnant. After she gives birth, she starts selling things from her cousin's old inventory, and the community supports her by buying things from her. She's also cured from her sickness after giving birth and living her own life. Now, the structure follows the seasons of the year. In summer, she tries to find a husband, and her attacks are at their worst. And then in autumn, she's cast out, and the baby gets sick. In winter, she's fully abandoned by her cousin. In spring, she gets pregnant. In summer, she gives birth. Now, the fact that she got pregnant in spring is ironic because spring is kind of a season for rebirth and the flowering and everything like that. And it might have symbolized that Bibi is getting reborn in spring. She's cured in summer after giving birth, and all she needed was maybe the intercourse, maybe the baby, or even some argue that all she needed was responsibility for herself because no one really thought she could she has what it takes to be a woman. That's why no one married her. She doesn't know how to be a woman. She can't take care of a man. She can't do stuff like that. Now, the point of view of this story is first person, and it is first person, but not really, kind of, because the community is the one who's talking. It's a we. The point of view is we. Now, this is good because it gives an unbiased view of Bibi and everything that happens, because it's in the view of many people. And it also means that the community at that time is very intertwined. They're very together, and they act as one. It is also known that it's that the women of the community are the ones who's speaking. Now, the title of the story even has two possible meanings. One being the actual medical treatment of Bibi Haldar, like the treatment of Bibi Haldar, the actual treatment, and the other being how she is treated by her family. In this story, the absence of partition references is apparent because it is something that's happening and no one can change it really. But the author decided not to put it in, kind of. Now, the post-colonial lens can be applied to the story. Haldar might be the colonizer, Bibi the colonized, or Haldar might be England and Bibi might be India and Pakistan, maybe. Social power is also apparent. She's at the bottom of the caste system, just like Burima from A Real Durwan. She's also a woman, which makes the reader use the feminist lens. Just like Burima in the story, Larry describes a woman's job as to cook and clean and to please their men and care for them. This means women are almost second-class citizens, and it fills the archetype of a typical housewife expected to please a man. Also, the fact that Bibi can only be cured by a man ties into a historical disease called female hysteria, which is exactly what Bibi is described to have. That was common in the Victoria era. We also used archetypal lens and historical lens right there. Now, the two stories have similar characters, both female, both have the same social standings, both paid with food and shelter instead of money. Bibi also gets a place in society, and in the end, unlike Burima, who's kicked out. That's a difference between the stories. Perhaps that's caused by Burima not actually being part of a community and being a refugee. Now, the author might appeal to an audience of other refugees and people who are cast out of their society and not really accepted. Her life also had an effect on the storytelling. She's the daughter of Bengali Indian immigrants and was born in London but became American. Her parents took her to her hometown to experience where she's from, and that may have been an effect on her stories. Her hometown is Calcutta, which we know is Burima's home.
In this section of the video, I'll be specifically talking about Minutes of Glory by Ngugi wa Thiong'o and Certain Wines from the South by Ama Ata Aido. Certain Wines from the South comes from West Africa, while Minutes of Glory erupts from the East. First, let me start by summarizing our first African short story, Minutes of Glory, a story written by the author Ngugi wa Thiong'o that revolves around an African woman named Beatrice. The story is written in a third-person style. Beatrice was a bar girl who wished to fit in her community, but she didn't have the resources required by her social norms. She desired to be like the other women who caught the eyes of the rich man in the bar, even if it meant being used sexually. All that was changed when she stole money from a client to help her look prettier. Beatrice then used this money to buy dresses and stretch her hair, allowing her to be the center of attraction. This short Minutes of Glory came to an end when the guy who she stole money from called the police to arrest her. Structure. The structure of the story is organized in a way that is divided into 3 acts. In the beginning, Beatrice, the main character, is introduced to the setting. The story begins by explaining Beatrice's character and defining her personal issues. The author describes Beatrice as an outsider who desires to blend in. Then in the middle, the author develops a series of obstacles where Beatrice decides to steal a man. That leads the reader to find out about her downfall in the end of the story. In the end, Beatrice is arrested for robbery. This structure has an effect because it allows the reader to keep on reading to find out what happens at the end. This would attract women who might be struggling in our society. As we read the story, we discover 3 major lenses that highlight the plot: archetypical lens, feminist gender lens, and finally, the social power lens. The archetypical lens looks for a recurring theme throughout the story. In Minutes of Glory, the theme of identity loss and insecurity was present. Beatrice is unaware who she is and feels like she has to aspire to be someone who she isn't, and that illustrates the theme of identity loss. Now, let's analyze the feminist gender lens in the story that focuses on gender equality and examines if both genders in the story are being treated equally. The purpose of Beatrice's suffering in her society goes back to the idea of her gender being a woman. Beatrice is forced to work at a bar, and that is all because of her gender, not allowing her to be educated. In a society like Beatrice's, all that was expected from them was to work and clean. The author states, Beatrice and other girls had to wake up at 5 or so, make tea for the lodgers, clean up the bar, and wash dishes and glasses. Lastly, we're going to test the social power lens in the story. This lens focuses on the social classes and the social struggles. The social struggles of Beatrice were mainly created by her gender and lack of financial power. She wanted to be like the other black women in the bar who would attempt to make money and use it to buy extensions and wigs to make them look more attractive. Eventually, she managed to do the same trick, but she was arrested after she stole money from one of the men in the bar. All decisions are evidently taken by men, and the story illustrates women as second class citizens. Any desires by the rich men in the bar were fulfilled by Beatrice and other women alike. During the story, the author illustrates the power men have over women due to their wealth. The author states he would be trying his money power over girls. In this case, he refers to a male client. Our next short story is a Western African story called Certain Winds from the South by Ama Ata Aidu that circulates around the man who goes by the name of Isa. Isa and his wife Haya were blessed with a newborn baby, but due to the family's financial issues, Isa believes he must move to the south of Ghana if he was to provide food and shelter to his wife and newborn child. In Certain Winds from the South, the structure of the story is organized similarly to Minutes of Glory. The story is also divided into 3 parts: plot introduction, crisis, and resolution. At first, Isa and his wife are introduced as they welcome their newborn baby. As the story continues, the reader can observe a crisis when Isa decides to move to the south, leaving his family all alone. Haya and her mother struggle to survive, and the story comes to an end in a resolution where we don't see Isa coming back. First, let's discuss the archetypical lens, and as we said before, this lens looks for a recurring theme throughout the story. In Certain Winds from the South, family disintegration is a very common theme that continues through the course of the plot. Ma'asana has a fear of losing her son-in-law and her daughter losing her husband, just as it happened to her when her husband migrated, leaving her alone to take care of her daughter. Ma'asana states, no, he did not come back. She warns her daughter that Isa might never come back, just like her father never did. The female discrimination in the story allows the reader to discover a feminist gender lens. The story of Certain Winds from the South provides 2 examples of why women are treated unfairly in the story. First, the reader can observe the silence from the wife, Hawa, who completely refuses to respond in any conversation between the family. This suggests that women weren't able to voice their opinions. Second, in the society, Haya and Ma'asana have no right to disagree with their male husbands if they were to refuse to let them move to the south. This is supported by the following quote: "How is it we cannot hold our men? This shows that women have no choice but to stay in their villages as housewives." Finally, the social power lens is explicitly illustrated in the story. Let me explain how. The struggles of the family are created by their financial problems. Although most families collapse due to the husbands abandoning their families in search of the economic opportunities in the south, Isa is keen. Migrating is the only solution to this financial outbreak. When the mother-in-law is notified that Isa is leaving, she questions him by saying, "But my son, why must you travel that far just to cut grass?" He then responds, "Ma, you know it's not the same. If I did that here, people would think I was mad. But over there, I've heard that not only do they like it, but the government pays you to do it." Now let us compare these 2 African short stories. Despite the stories coming from 2 different parts of the African continent, both of the plots lie in the same life struggles that revolve around wealth, gender, and social class. Minutes of Glory and Certain Winds from the South illustrate 2 characters who believe money is their only problem, and that it is the solution to many of their daily struggles. Little do they know that the personal gain of money has lots of side effects that threaten their own lives.
Now we're going to compare all the stories we have. Now we can see that they're similar because Beatrice can be compared to Bibi Halder. For Bibi was certain that the only way to attract men to marry her is to make her appearance look better. When she started a diet and eating well, she wished to make herself look more appealing to men, just as Beatrice wanted to do with the money she stole. They both also have self-confidence problems that have to do with their appearance. However, they're kind of different because Bibi is loved in her community and is taken care of by the people in her village. She also works for her cousin in exchange for food and shelter, while Beatrice works for money. This shows they're not in the same social level, mostly, and Beatrice's struggle came mainly from her gender and lack of financial power. The same can be said for Bibi. The only way to cure her was to have intercourse with a man, and she is not financially independent at all. Furthermore, women are seen as second-class citizens in both stories. It is clear that men are in full control of them, and women abide by that. In conclusion, these 4 stories are similar and deal with the same topics and struggles seen in society, even though they are from 2 very different and far parts of the world.
Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed our analysis.